Hello, welcome to episode 219 of the Epic Film Challenge 2, 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die from 1985, from director Juzo Itami, the Japanese film Tampopo. Where do I start with a film like Tampopo? Well, with most films, I guess you would start with finding out what a movie's about before you go and see it, right? So I read the plot on the back of the Criterion Blu-ray that I have up here, and it seemed like a typical Japanese drama, sickly sweet, you know, that would kind of include a romance that blossomed and a feel-good kind of ending where everything kind of gets wrapped up nicely, and, you know, it's just one of those happy-go-lucky kind of films that plays on the melodrama and leans into the human emotion a little bit more than it maybe comes out in real life. You know, it just seemed like one of those stories. It's about a widow who is running the ramen restaurant that her husband left behind. It's floundering. She meets a few people and they help her get back on her feet and you know, get the restaurant to start kind of flourishing again and being a successful business and kind of honoring the memory of her late husband. It all seemed like it was going to be very sweet. And it was nothing like that at all. Nothing like that at all. And I love how my expectations get completely flipped on their head sometimes. I don't know how this film was sold when it first came out. The phrase that has been thrown around is a ramen western. And this film very much, even though it's a Japanese film, is so influenced by American filmmaking, or maybe it's even aping American filmmaking. Juzo Itami definitely employed a lot of American techniques in making this film. Western techniques, I guess you could call them, both in the terms of Western filmmaking, but also Western filmmaking, like the Old West movies. That kind of style is kind of weaved into the film in a very humorous way. Even like the typical kind of American sports movie, you know, kind of getting someone to kind of, getting the underdog to basically win the big one. There's lots of American influence in this film, and it reminded me very much of Big Trouble in Little China, in the sense that it's a film that takes so much from a different culture, but also blends it into its own thing. You know, Big Trouble in Little China, heavily influenced by Asian films, but also kind of weaves in its own Americanisms into it. That's how I kind of, and they're both made around the same time. There's something very unique about Tampopo. I was initially quite conflicted about this film because I watched the first 10 minutes and I thought, this is great, I'm loving this. And I was just like, I picked up the Blu-ray, I looked at the back, and there was the kind of dreaded sentence. Let me just actually get the Blu-ray, I can get the exact wording. There we go. Rated 15 for strong sex and violence. And I thought, oh no. No, not this one. This was, it started off so good. Strong sex, it's going to be one of those films, isn't it? And it's a film that's very much about food. You know, it's this centered around this ramen restaurant that this woman is trying to kind of get back on its feet, and also she is not a very good chef. She can't cook ramen like her husband used to, so she needs to learn all the intricacies of making ramen. That's what the whole movie is about, is her journey of learning from other people, stealing from other people, you know, finding out the exact kind of ways to make every little part of making ramen perfect. From the broth that it gets boiled in, like what's the perfect amount of bones to put in, the perfect amount of time to let it simmer, all that stuff. The tricks of the trade that she's trying to pick up, and she's helped along by these people, and this group forms throughout the film, centered around these two characters. Well, not centered around them, but it begins with them, these two truckers, Goro and Gun. And Gun, who is a very minor character in the film, he's always kind of there, but doesn't have much to do. He looked so familiar to me, and at the end I realized it was Ken Watanabe, who is probably most popular or most well-known from the Christopher Nolan films like Batman Begins, Inception, and so on. And yeah, as soon as I knew who it was, I thought, how did I not see it from the beginning? But Goro is this guy. I mean, he's got the cowboy hat and everything. He's a trucker, and he stops one night, it's raining, to get some food at this ramen restaurant, and he sees that it's in a bit of a jam. You know, the business isn't going very well, and he says to the woman who owns the shop, who's called Tampopo, by the way, that's the name of the lead character. He says to her, you should probably do this with your ramen, you know, probably make it a little bit better. And then he leaves, and then she comes after him and she says, please teach me, please help me somehow, I'm begging you, you know, any free time you got, please just help me. So this guy Goro and his friend Gun, they decide to, you know, help Tampopo. And they go on this journey together where they'll find other people who are willing to help. They go to this homeless community that Goro knows of, and all these homeless people are like, they're just like the finest kind of food connoisseurs, you know, they know all the best cuisine, and you have these like homeless men with these scruffy beards and dirty faces talking about this wine that's so perfect and everything, and just the perfect amount of this and the perfect amount of that, and they get this old kind of a guy who's an expert in ramen to kind of come out of his homeless squalor and help them on this journey, and more people get added to the group along the way. In fact, that whole homeless sequence was so like touching to me. It's so like surreal and out of the realms of kind of reality, but it's I don't know, there was something so wonderful about it. The scene when who was the young kid? Tampopo's son. And by the way, Tampopo, the actress who played her, Nobuko Miyamoto, I believe was her name. She was the wife of the director, Itami, and their son played the son of Tampopo, and he goes off with one of the homeless men into this kitchen. They sneak in and cook like the finest rice omelette. There's something just so funny about a homeless man sneaking into the back of a restaurant to cook this fine meal. You know what I mean? It's just, it flips that convention on its head of homeless people kind of just scrounging through the trash for food. No, they're going into the restaurant and cooking this, like, you know, Michelin star class meal. Well, maybe not that far, but you know, just that it really focuses on the cooking of it, and how it's, you know, it really delves into food as art as much as it is food for consumption. And so, you know, if you like the kind of food that's featured in the film, it probably wouldn't be wise to watch the film on an empty stomach. However, there's some stuff that maybe would have the adverse effect, which I'll get to. And I'm all over the place with this because I just don't know where to start. I don't know where to go in the middle or where to end this. There's just so much to say about this film. It's going to be a complete gush fest, I feel like, because I seemingly almost loved everything about the film. I love the characters. I love Tampopo. She, you know, she's just so kind of sweet, you know, but also just willing to kind of put the work in, and there's something about, there's an infectious kind of, what's the word, not even innocence, but there's a feeling to her character that just really gets you behind her. There's an underdog feeling that just screams out from her character, just the way she plays her. And I just thought that she gave a really good performance, especially towards the end. And there's nothing in this film that I would say is an amazing performance, because it is at its heart a comedy. And so it is played for laughs, but at the same time there is a heart to the characters to get into. It never goes into that full-bore emotional side, but it definitely has a little bit of weight for the characters, particularly in Tampopo's case. It doesn't really delve into her missing her husband very much, and I don't think it really mentioned how long he'd been gone for. But certainly that absence is felt in her life. But mainly it's about pushing forward as well, which I quite liked. And again, the comedy. This film, I mean, for me, comedies, unless they're made in the 80s or the early 90s, I find it hard to kind of laugh at most comedies, you know, especially modern ones. It's trying too hard, you know, it's toilet humor, or it's fuck this, it's fuck that, and, you know, sex humor is a big one that people go to again and again, and I'm just like, you know, Baywatch this year, just abysmal, you know, as far as the comedy goes. It wasn't, I mean, it was a pretty poor film, you know, not the worst I'd seen, but the comedy just completely flat for me. And, you know, comedies frustrate me because they should be a good time, but a lot of the times I don't find them all that funny. There are loads of exceptions, but I feel like generally the comedy film is something that doesn't appeal to me very much, and I find it hard to really laugh out loud at films. This film had me in stitches, and I watched it in the middle of the night, so I had to be quiet, and I was just proper covering my mouth, like I was giving myself an ab workout, suppressing all the laughs I had during this film. And when I wasn't laughing, I was just grinning from ear to ear because I loved the film. So many great moments. There's a fantastic scene when Goro has a fight with this guy, and it takes place underneath this flyover bridge, and there's this awesome shot of them fighting, and it's just their shadows almost, because you're just seeing the kind of dark outline of these characters, and it almost reminded me of the fight sequence in They Live. I'd love to know if John Carpenter had seen this, because honestly I got a bit of a John Carpenter feel from something about this film. But the fight sequence was funny, and again, that epic shot of the kind of shadows underneath the bridge fighting, there's some kind of stylistic kind of choices that are really cool in the film. And once you see the making of documentary, which I'm making a whole other video about, so stay tuned for that later on today, for Asian Cinema Season. I did a whole video talking about the making of, which just inspired me so much. I'm just brimming with enthusiasm and passion for this film, so the review is definitely going to be, and it feels like so far, jumbled and all over the place. I'm just talking about the things that I loved. Also, I'd love to know if Richard Linklater had seen this film, because there is an almost Slacker-esque feeling to the second, not part of this film, but this is a film of two parts. This is a film of two distinct threads, I guess you could say. The first one is the main story. We have Goro and Gun, the truckers. They pull up to the ramen restaurant. They meet Tampopo. She asks them to help her, and they build this group to help her realize this dream of making her ramen restaurant great, bringing customers back in, but also perfecting the art of cooking perfect ramen. You know, that's kind of the main storyline. Outside of that, we have these little episodic moments, these vignettes that are all to do with food, and they're just comedy skits. They have no bearing on the main plot whatsoever, and the film will just digress into these tangents. But the way that we go into them is very Slacker-esque, I felt like, even though this was made before Slacker, where we'll see Goro and Tampopo kind of, I think she's jogging across the a riverside somewhere, and Goro's kind of following her and kind of, you know, motivating her and stuff, and then these businessmen walk past them, and the camera decides to just follow the businessmen, and then we go to this building where they're having a meeting, and this whole other scene starts happening, and then we go downstairs and there's another group of people eating food, and we follow them. You know, a character will walk past the ramen restaurant, we'll follow this character inexplicably to another kind of comedy vignette, and for the most part I loved these little vignettes. They were really funny, just fun gags, played really well. I was really skeptical at first, like, where is this going? Until I realized this is just pure vignette stuff. This is just slice of life. And I don't know if I liked the fact, because I really wanted to get back to Tampopo and Goro and so on, but it also made me appreciate those scenes even more, you know? And it wasn't like the comedy vignettes were bad. You know, if they'd have been bad jokes, then it wouldn't have worked, but I found them really funny in various different ways. A sequence of an old woman going into a grocery store and just touching food. She's got this obsession with just like touching food, like opening cheese and just putting her finger in it and stuff, and the shopkeeper kind of is chasing her around, and it's just so funny. It's like this silent comedy bit, and I loved it. Now, the opening of the film, the very first scene, this is where I thought, this is going to be different. This is going to be something different, and it's set in the cinema. The camera is where the cinema screen would be. We see all the people sitting down, and this man in a white suit comes down, and he's got this extravagant food platter in front of him, and he's sitting down, and then he notices the camera. He walks up to it, and he's like, "Oh, hello there," you know, and he's basically talking to an audience who would be theoretically in a cinema themselves. So right from the get-go, you get the idea that this film is not going to take the conventions of a typical film all that seriously. We're going to have fun in this movie. And I loved how he talked about how annoying it is when people rustle their food in cinemas, because that's one of my pet peeves. It just kind of validates something that I've been just ranting about for so many years, it feels like. But also he talks about how, you know, we all have a short film that plays in our eyes before we die and stuff. And then he's like, anyway, the film's about to start. And then the film begins and we go into the movie. I just loved the opening. It just gave the perfect sense of fun that would be stretched out throughout the entire film, I felt like. Now, however, the man in the white suit in the beginning of the movie, who does that little skit in the cinema, I would have loved it if that was all we saw from that character, like all the other vignettes. But the man in the white suit comes back throughout the film in different episodes. This was my problem with the film. And it took me a while to reconcile it. When I watched the making of documentary, I felt better about it, seeing the actors kind of having fun making those scenes. But I honestly, and again, this goes into a whole other thing, and I'm so sorry, this video's all over the place. I really wish I could have done a more structured video for this, but it is what it is. To get into a whole other tangent, fan edits. I would love to make my own edit of this film, and that's terrible, I think. In my heart of hearts, I feel like when a director makes a movie, that's their movie. That's what you get. I don't watch fan edits, I don't watch fan cuts, extended cuts, anything like that, unless it's been done by the director or you know, different circumstances. I would love to edit this film because there are a few things in it that I feel don't need to be there, and that I feel just detract from everything else that's so great. It's nothing too offensive, it's just stuff that I don't like. Number one, we have the man in the white suit with his girlfriend, and they're in a hotel room, and he's ordering all this food, and he's very much a guy who gets turned on by food, when it's used with sex. So we have this sequence where, you know, he's putting salt on her nipples and licking it off, and putting cream on her armpit and licking that off and stuff, and putting like some sort of live animal, like a I don't know what it is, like an eel or something, in a bowl on her belly, and it's just like, no, and I've never got that whole thing, that the food sex thing, smothering women, and no, disgusting, not at all. It makes me feel ill thinking about it. Like you see those kind of, those sexy photo shoots where women get doused in milk. I'm just like, oh, it's gonna go sour. Like I just don't get it at all, not one iota. And apparently it's kind of going into the idea of food being as pleasurable as sex. Okay, I get the idea. But I didn't like that scene very much. And there's another scene which I was okay with after I learnt something kind of pivotal to the scene. The man in the white suit is at the ocean, and an oyster catcher comes out of the sea, and she's wearing basically just a white gown that's see-through. You know, it's wet, you can see everything, and she looked like 13. And I suddenly got so uncomfortable. I was like, oh my god, the director's just a perv. You know, I couldn't believe it. I was gutted, because I was loving the film, and here's this underage actress. You can see everything. And then I'm like, wait, what's going to happen next? And then she starts like licking the finger of this guy, and then she starts licking the blood off of his lip, and it's like, oh no. Later on, I actually made an effort to find out who that actress was, and she was actually like 19. But she looked a lot younger. I was like, oh. Kind of like took some of again, I just felt so disappointed when it looked like this was clearly a 13, 14-year-old girl and shouldn't have been in that kind of a scene. Anyway, the scene was what it was, but it was really that first scene with the man in the white suit and his girlfriend kind of doing all that kind of food play in bed. Just, yeah, not into that stuff whatsoever. And you're not supposed to be, obviously, but I didn't like that scene. I just felt like it brought the film down a little bit. And another thing, there is an animal death in the film, which I would love to just cut out. It's a turtle, and they just pull it up, you can see it's moving and alive, and just stick the knife straight in, just cutting, blood spewing out. It's just like, and they're talking about how when you kill an animal, you got to do it in one kind of stroke, you know, and kill it instantly, otherwise the muscles start to convulse and it kind of ruins I don't know. So there's a point to it, but I don't know, I didn't want to see that in the film. Anyway, I would love to edit those things out. And I would also like to edit the ending out. I didn't like the ending because it's, and again, I suppose it goes back to, and it's kind of funny actually. I'll talk about the ending at the ending of the video. This is a long one. I loved the music of the film. There's some classical stuff used, but it all felt very fitting, and that is delved into in the making of documentary, which I found really interesting. I like the cinematography, the way this film looked. The Blu-ray looks stunning, 4K restoration, like the colors. And just the way he shot the food, you know, and a lot of detail was put into making sure that the food looked right on film. And again, I talk about that in the companion video to this one, where I talk about the making of documentary included on the Blu-ray. And I feel like I'm talking in circles now, but this film was so exciting to me because it was so wildly different from most kind of films I think I've ever seen before. There was something heartfelt about it, even though it didn't take itself too seriously in the slightest. I loved the characters. I wanted to see more of the characters. You know, the film left me wanting more, and that's always a great thing. And not in a, you know, I felt like I'd been shortchanged, but in a way that I loved the characters so much that I felt kind of a little bit sad that I'd never get to see them again, you know. And I thought the guy who played Goro was fantastic. I loved his charisma on screen. He reminded me of, you know, an American leading star. You know, he had that kind of appeal to him. And I think Tampopo was the perfect kind of foil to his character. They kind of worked well together as these two contrasting characters, and that kind of blossoming romance between them was very kind of subtle and handled perfectly. I thought the side characters are really funny. The vignettes, as I said, were really funny. It was funny. It was funny. It was enjoyable. It was different. And that's all I can really add, I guess. I loved almost everything about this film. And by the time it was done, I just thought, oh, I can't wait to watch that again. And I rarely get that feeling. And then watching the making of, I just got so excited about filmmaking and had so much kind of I felt like the documentary on the making of this film is perhaps one of the best documentaries about making a film I've seen. And it just enhanced everything else about the film. So when I go back to it, it's going to be so much fun to kind of know more about how it was made and appreciate the finer aspects of all the little details that were shown in that making of. Which really just, again, a lot of people don't like making ofs because they kind of, they pull the curtain back too much for people. For me, it enhances everything. It really does. And there's probably more I could talk about, but I guess I'll just leave it there. I had such a great time with the film. Again, the scene with the homeless people, I loved when they all kind of unexpectedly kind of got down and started singing this very beautiful kind of harmonic song. And again, it was just so weird and out of nowhere, but kind of heartfelt and kind of almost moving. You know, this film is just full of these wonderful moments, and going into the cooking aspect of it, and Tampopo's journey is just so fascinating to watch. And the film just, again, doesn't take itself too seriously, but it gets in under your skin at the same time. I had so much fun with this. This is a new favourite film, without a doubt. Loved almost everything about it. Again, I think I'm just going to have to look past those scenes that I don't like, with the man in the white suit, the turtle death. No film is completely infallible, but this, you know, everything else is just so good and so enjoyable and funny. And I'm just talking myself into circles. Is it a film you should see before you die? Yes. Absolutely. Is there a high chance that you won't get on with this film? Yes, absolutely. Is there a high chance you'll really get something different out of this film and fresh? Yes, absolutely. I think it's well worth the risk. It's well worth putting yourself out there to check this film out. I think it's like down in price now on Amazon as a Criterion in the UK, so I mean, just give it a shot. I mean, even if you don't like the film, the making of might be fascinating. I just think that it was a fantastic viewing experience as something where you get the Blu-ray and you get the making of and the gorgeous restoration, you know, the whole 9 yards. Just, yeah, my experience with Tampopo has absolutely been a highlight of Asian cinema season, and probably a highlight of my movie watching in 2017. Loved it, loved it, loved it. And, okay, the ending scene, we'll end with that. So, I won't spoil the ending of the film, but the credits play over a baby suckling on its mother's breast. And the camera just slowly zooms in on this for like 3 or 4 minutes. And that's it. And again, I guess it ties into that kind of playful way of food being explored in the movie. But after 3 minutes, I was just like, this is so unnecessary. After 3.5 minutes, I just started laughing because it was just so ridiculous. It was just so audacious, you know. Just let's just have a shot of a baby sucking on a tit for 4 minutes to end the film. Like it was just so kind of offbeat, and I don't know. Maybe I did like it in that sense, where it just won me over by the end of the credits, where it was just like, it's just so ridiculous. Like again, audacious. I felt like could be applied to a few of the scenes in this film, and yeah. So I'll leave it there. I can't believe I talked this long, and there's another 20 minutes of me gushing about the making of documentary. So this is a Tampopo extravaganza today. So if you have any interest in me talking about that, go check out that video. I'll try and post it around the same time as this one. And that's about it. Thank you for watching. Leave me your thoughts down below if you've seen the film, if you think I'm being crazy in loving the film this much, and also if you've seen any of Juzo Itami's other films. I know he died about a decade after this, which is rather unfortunate, and under suspicious circumstances as well, which is weird. But anyway, that's it. I'm going to stop waffling on now. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.